When I went over to the Football Association first, 1950, you wouldn't wear a good suit going over there with a door to the place. There was about 5 people working in the office, 4 maybe, working in the office. I don't think they ever had a fella or a woman in cleaning the place from one end of the year to another. And then all of a sudden, Jack came along and the money started coming in. And they got a lovely frontage, a lovely reception area. And one of the top officials, Lord rest him, he's dead now. And I said to him, isn't it marvellous to see the change? And he said, I suppose you're going to tell me Jack Charlton done that. Well, I said, you didn't do it, so and the fellas you worked with didn't do it, so.
Jack, obviously a huge influence on you. You know, performed as a player and probably as a manager as well was Don Revie, you know, the legendary Leeds manager. Did he have as big an influence on you as people think?
Tremendous influence. I remember Don saying to me in a practice match one day, if I was the manager of this club, I wouldn't play you because you spoiled it for everybody else because you're always running up for corners and going for crosses and you're always running with the ball. He said, I wouldn't play you. So I went, well, go off. And about 3 weeks later, they made him manager.
Before Don became manager, Don played at Leeds, as you know. There was a man called Taylor was the manager, and it wasn't a very, very well-disciplined club. And Jack was one of the ill-disciplined players in that particular setup. And Don would have known that when he took over as manager, and I think Jack was on his way.
I went to see Matt Busby and they were going to sign me and he put it back and I had a bit of a row with him and told him I was not coming to Man United. I was going to go back to Leeds. I was going to apologise to Sid Owen. I was going to apologise to Les Cocker. I was going to apologise to Don Revie because I'd caused the bloody eruptions of that summer.
Jack made a big decision, which was to buckle down and get on with the job. And that's what he did. And that's when he became one of the best centre-halves. Well, he was the best centre-half, in my opinion, for 5 or 6 years in England at that time.
Leeds were in the second division at this point, weren't they?
Yeah, when Dunne just took the job.
Right.
And I was mixed up completely. You know, I didn't know, and I came back and I apologised to them all as I said I was going to do. I signed a contract, never even discussed money, just signed a contract.
And I think Jack would be inclined, if we lost the goal, to go up centre forward or try and get a goal. Yeah. Yeah, but that was his personality, Jack. I think, you know, Jack has a very strong personality, as you know, and when we had the same for Jack with the lads, he wasn't always right, but he was never wrong, you know. So, but he would, the good thing about Jack was he would do it with the right intentions.
I was always up for corner kicks, I was always up for free kicks, I was always up for this. And Don Revie one day said to me, he gave me a bit of a telling off with that some team had scored against us when I was up for a corner kick.
And I think that's what Don would have said to him, just stay back and defend the goal and do what you're good at. And he did.
And I said, well, I can't be up there and back there at the same time. If you don't want it, so I said, I'm not going up there anymore. If you know, let them get on with it. I'll stick at the back and because playing centre back to me and them was easy. It was the running up and down the pitch and the picking up the positions and getting back into position and running like hell all the time. And I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm just going to be a centre back. And within 6 months, I was playing for England.
And he stayed in the England team for another, what, 4 or 5 years. But in '66, I'd say he was at his peak. Yeah. But he was a good player, Jack. He was much quicker than he looked. He was well balanced off both sides for clearing the ball, left foot and right foot, and a good header of the ball.
Don was as straight as a die. He was honest, straightforward. If he made you a promise, he'd keep it. He'd shift heaven and earth to keep it. He used to call me in at the end of each season for about 3 years, and he used to say to me, the first time I went in, he said, give me a cheque for 2,000 quid. And he said, that's a little bonus for you because you've had a good season. He said, you played all the games, you've had a good season, and just a little bonus for you. And I said to him, no, it's not. I said, it's because you've given Clarkey more money than me. Well, he just signed Alan Clark. And he said, yeah. Because I had an agreement with him that being the senior player, nobody would be on more money than me. Only I didn't argue about money, but I said nobody would be on more money than me. And he must have given Clarkey an extra couple of grand. And he brought me up to him. He was that sort of man, Don. He was very honest, very straight.
And did he give you advice, or did you just learn from him as a manager that?
He used to come and tell me things that he would never have told me before in discussions about, you know, how you handle a player, how you handle this, how you do that. And I learned quite a lot of Don, and then I went as manager to Middlesbrough. And he gave me a sheet like that. And it was everything that I was responsible for when I became the manager at Middlesbrough. And I went and gave it to the board, they looked at it and said, but if we agree to this, you'll run the club. I said, well, I'm the boss. I said, I'm the boss. I said, I won't interfere with 90% of that. I said, but I can if I want to. I said, anyway, it's there and you've got to sign it, and if you don't sign it, I'm not coming. I said, I'm going to go out in the room and I'm going to wait 20 minutes, and if you don't agree, then I'm leaving in 20 minutes. And they called me back in and said, yeah, okay.
Wow. They signed it. And that was Don Revy's list?
Don Revy's list about the things that you should be responsible for. You've got to be the boss. You've got to be the number one within a club, so that people know who to come to and go to, or have the responsibility. You've got to take the responsibility.
Jack did it his own way, and he believed in, that's what he believed. I believed what I believed. So on many occasions we'd clash in that way, but always in the right way. You know, Jack and I wouldn't have the same philosophy on the game, but we're still good friends today. You know, I like Jack, and we had lots of rows on the pitch and that. But I like Jack. I think there's a basic decency about Jack, and honesty about Jack in what he does.
In early December 1985, Des Casey, the then president of the FAI, phoned Jack Charlton. In the course of the conversation, Casey inquired, would Charlton be interested in managing the Irish soccer team? Jack had no hesitancy in answering in the affirmative. Needless to say, this was before the formal vote in the FAI office to see who would actually get the job. On the first ballot, the votes were Bob Paisley 9 votes, John Giles, Liam Toohey and Jack Charlton 3 votes each. On the second count, the votes cast for Giles and Toohey transferred to Charlton, along with one of Paisley's original votes. Jack Charlton was voted in as Irish team manager on a vote of 10-8.
There was a lot of shenanigans going on, to be quite honest, in the Football Association at the time that Jack was appointed. Apparently there were 18 people involved in the selection, and on the first ballot, there was supposed to be a ballot. Jack got 3 votes. And it was supposed to be set up. The story is it was set up in a certain way for Bob Paisley to have the job.
The guy they really wanted was, of course, Bob Paisley, who at that stage was one of the, you know, patriarchal figures of football management. And he had recently left Liverpool, and they thought this was the guy.
There's 3 votes each.
For you, Lehman.
Which left 9 votes for Bob Paisley. And they decided to say, well, pick a winner between Jack, Liam Toohey and myself to go against Bob Paisley. And the idea was that even with the 9 votes, there would be 1 vote extra for Bob Paisley. And somebody changed their mind.
And lo and behold, after the white smoke went up, we were called in, and you could have heard a pin drop when Jack Charlton's name was mentioned.
I remember Jack's first game actually was against Wales, and you know, to be honest, I think a few of us were surprised that an Englishman actually got the job. That was first and foremost. But he took it on, and he introduced himself, and you know, he was brilliant with us. And the first couple of training sessions were great. We actually took to him straight away.
But you didn't even get to pick the team for that game, did you?
I didn't know the players, I didn't know who we had, I didn't know anything about the sort of structure of the team. So I thought, well, I got Mick Byrne to pick the team, and then I went out and played. And then I felt that my job was after the game and when I seen what I'd got.
And obviously we were beaten by Wales, I think 1-0. And of course Jack blames me on that because he said he didn't know the players, I did.
How did you get Ray Houghton who turned out to be one of our great servants for many years?
Through Morris Setters. Morris came to me and he said, there's a kid playing at Oxford called John Aldrich, and he's scoring a lot of goals. I had a word with him, he had a word with him when he watched him play, and John had said his grandmother was from somewhere here. So, I went down to Oxford to see John. And after the game, I went to John, I got him into the bar where everybody came to after the game was finished, and I got John across, and I said to him, do you want to play for Ireland? I said, you got a grandmother or something? And he went, yeah, I'd love to come, yeah. And then John said to me, what about him? And I pointed across to me, it was Ray Houghton. No, he's Scottish, he's from Glasgow. And John said, no, I think he qualifies, and he shouted Ray across, and Ray came across to us, and I said to him, you got any Irish connections? He said, yeah, my father's from Donegal. I said, is he? I said, do you want to come and play for Ireland? And he said, yeah, I'd love to.
He says, but I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you want to, talk it through with your family. It's very important that you're happy in yourself with what you want to do. But we'd love you to come and play for the Republic. And I spoke to my two brothers, John and Ken, and my father at the time. And my dad said, look, you've got to go with your heart where you feel's right for you.
And two great players.
Oh, I got two players on the same day. I only went to see one, and I finished up with two, who lasted right the way through my period with the Irish. They were there all the time.
And when he became first, you had Mick Byrne, you had Pat Byrne, you had O'Brien, you know, and he couldn't tell the difference between Byrne and O'Brien. And he'd call one of them he called the player Mick Byrne, and he called the physio Pat Byrne or O'Brien. And the fellas be falling around the place laughing some of the things he said, you know. Unintentionally, he could be very funny.
When we went training, it was where people said to me, you can't remember people's names. Because I remember taking one of the players and I kept saying, what to call him, what to call him. Now, I knew Liam Brady and I knew Frank Stapleton, I know all of these players that were in England, but the rest of them that made up the team, the squad, I hadn't a clue.
The 10 years that I've been involved with the Irish team, under Jack, I was known as James. Now, I'm still known as James to Jack. So, and whenever he calls me James, foolish enough of me, even from the early days, I still answer to James.
I had a list, but it was all their second names. And I'm saying, I was meaning, what they call him, and they say, they call him Billy, or that's Sean, or that's Sean, or whatever, you know. And it stuck with me ever since. Everybody says that I couldn't remember the names of the players, which is perfectly true.
You know, trying to get around some of the foreign names, like, and you'd be talking about a foreign name, and you know the fella with the big, you know the fella, you know, and he'd be trying to explain to you about that fella. He wouldn't know. He was trying to think of his name, and you were supposed to visualise who was he talking about.
After the success of Ireland winning a 3-team tournament in Iceland in early summer '86, Jack Charlton's style of football was beginning to impose itself on the national team. There then began the roller coaster journey to the European Championships in Germany in 1988. Expectations were raised after a 2-2 away draw to Belgium. Our impressive away form was continued when we beat Scotland 1-0 in their own backyard. But unfortunately, we didn't capitalise on our home advantage. Our position was further worsened with an away defeat to Bulgaria, putting us in a situation where we needed a miracle from Scotland's final game away to the Bulgarians. That miracle duly arrived in the shape of Scotland's Gary Mackay when he popped up with a late winner in Sofia. Irish football would never be the same again.
I remember Liam Brady, who had a real go at, because he used to play and wanted to play off the back four. I didn't want him to play off the back four. And all of a sudden, Liam ran about 20 yards, 30 yards to get to this fullback, and the guy hit him with the ball, and the ball went out of play. And I went, that's exactly what I want you to do.
And he wanted to change the way Liam played. Now, Liam had slotted into a role that John Giles had occupied for many years with the Irish team, taking the ball off the back four somewhere around his own penalty area and working from there. Now, I suppose that was fine for Giles, who was coming near the end of his tether when he was doing it. But Brady was still in his prime at that stage, and Charlton saw that, interpreted it as meaning that Brady was taking the easy option.
Jack and I would have different philosophies on the game altogether. In that, you know, when I played with Jack and I'd go deep and he'd say, what are you doing here? You know, get up the field, I can do what you can do, and all that, which was total nonsense, really, because he couldn't do what I could do and I couldn't do what he could do. Right. You see, Jack sees the world through his own eyes, and he sees football through his own eyes. And this is only my theory on it, that when Jack is playing at the back at centre-half, Jack would see the world through a big centre-half's eyes. Right, so if he got a ball on the edge of the box and it was tight, there's a good chance he'd lose it. Whereas Bobby Charlton or Billy Bremner or myself, if we got the ball on the edge, or Liam Brady, get the ball on the edge of the box, it's no problem. So Jack always worked with the philosophy that don't want Liam Brady back there, don't want you back there, because you might lose it.
He wanted him to play off the front two, much more difficult. And Liam, whether by inclination or training or whatever, didn't adjust to it easily, and never, in the course, even though Jack played him there subsequently, he never really took to the role.
Jack Charlton, because he was, you know, an internationally renowned and World Cup medal-winning England player, did that make a difference to the officiating? You know, do you think referees kind of?
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny you come up with that, because it's you would have thought so, but we played out in Bulgaria. And the referee came in to say hello to Jack before the game. Came to look at the studs and the usual thing. But, Jackie, he said, how are you, Jackie? And Jack was talking to him. He said, we'll be all right with this referee. And he gave two decisions in that game. I think Mick McCarthy got pushed in the back in the corner and he gave nothing. And then there was a penalty which was given against Kevin Moran. I don't know whether it was inside or outside the box. And we never got the decision that night, so I would have said yes, but if that hadn't happened, you know, I'd love to say no.
It's often asked, what's the difference between you, John Giles, and Jack?
Well, I could quite honestly say the difference between John Giles, Liam Toohey, myself, and Jack is that Gary Mackay was playing for Jack. I mean, there's a very, very thin line between success and failure. I was in Saudi Arabia, and Ireland had finished their European campaign. And two pressmen rang me after Ireland's campaign had finished, Jack's first one, and they said, listen, the FAI are getting rid of Jack because it's not popular, this long ball game, and you know, Ronnie Whelan playing here and Paul McGrath playing there. And he was actually not being continued with. You know, there was a contract situation. According to the two guys around, they wanted my comment, and I said, well, it's a bit soon, he's only had one campaign. No, it's changing. What happened? Scotland went to Bulgaria, they beat them. Which is, and I don't even, Jack was even aware, he wasn't even bothered about that game, because I think it was a foregone conclusion that Bulgaria, who never lose in Sofia. But that's the thin line. I say that's a true story, and I know the persons who rang me in Saudi.
And that was the result of qualifiers for 88.
Yeah, and Jack came back on a white horse.
I think Ireland were definitely lucky to qualify. You have to be lucky when something happens over which you have no control, and yet it brings you to the podium. E.g., Gary Mackay from Heart of Midlothian, on a stinking wet night in Sofia, Scotland against Bulgaria, scores the goal that qualifies Ireland. It's like a friend of yours whom buying you a lotto ticket and you winning it without knowing.
Where would football be without local derbies? The Republic of Ireland were paired in the same group as England in Euro '88. This made headlines and sports pages all over the world. How would Jack Charlton, former World Cup medal winner with England in 1966, deal with playing against the country of his birth? The fact that the Dutch were also in the group, one of the great exponents of modern-day football, and their team included legends such as Gullit, Van Basten, Koeman and Rijkaard, all this was insignificant compared to the interest in the game with the old enemy. On Sunday, the 12th of June in Stuttgart, with the game barely 5 minutes old, Ray Houghton put the ball in the English net.
Hansen, in goes Aldridge, and Houghton!
My first international goal. I don't think a lot of people know that. You know, when they say what's your best goal you've ever scored, I always see England, and they say, oh, it was just because it was against England. Well, that's partly the reason, but more importantly, it was my first international goal, and it's something you never forget. And when it went in, it was like a dream come true. Everything that you ever wanted in football, that was there in that moment.
I mean, I've always been a professional, and Ireland paid for they paid my wages, so I wanted to beat England. I didn't want anybody else to beat England, but I wanted us to beat England.
It's a very complicated emotional situation, isn't it?
So we've gone to Germany, and I've lost me two main players, Mark Lawrence in centre midfield and Liam Brady. And we had to restructure the side, and fortunately we had a guy called Paul McGrath. And Paul McGrath went into centre midfield.
The night before England, we played England. We were in it wasn't a hotel, it was more of an army barracks we were in. And I'm in a very small room, and I was sitting down the bed. And he came in, and he sat with me. And only the two of us in the room. And he said, God, what's wrong with you tonight? I said, about tomorrow, you know. He said, boy, I said, a bit nervy. I said, don't be silly, he said. We'll hammer this crowd. That was England. We beat this crowd, I've no doubt.
And we were up for it. You know, the bit was between the teeth. Every player, you know, it was 22 in the squad, all 22 wanted to play. It was a game everyone was desperate to play in because it was against England, it was against players who you knew. All the pressure was on them. There wasn't so much pressure on ourselves because this was the mighty England. They were supposed to go out and win the tournament.
We scored first, which was probably a bad time to score. We scored early in the game, and then all of a sudden you've got the lads have got to defend that.
One goal lead is very hard to protect, particularly when the opposition's got a lot of the ball. You keep giving it back to them. We weren't holding on to it as well as we should have done.
Like, I was crippled from the first half. Everyone was carrying me for the second half of that game, and Packy was pulling off saves from Peter Beardsley, Gary Lineker.
And another run in behind McCarthy. Here's Gary Lineker. And Bonner did well.
You get a feeling in football, this is your day. You know, I don't know how you can explain that. It's just something that's there. And it just seemed that the more that England tried, the harder it became for them to score. And there was a real belief that we could hang on.
To us, Bono was the hero, but not to Jack Charlton. He took him aside afterwards, and I think he was fairly scathing in his comments to Bono, and Bono couldn't understand this.
Goalkeeper should be the one who stays behind us, the back four. And as the game goes towards the other end, they come further and further out. And any ball played over long for somebody who can run, like, say, Gary Lineker, he's there to get to the ball first.
Jack and Packy always had this row, because he wanted Packy to come outside his box and be a sweep. In other words, if they did play a long ball over their top, he would be there to sweep up. But then Packy's thing was, if he came too far out and someone saw it and chipped them.
And on at least 3 occasions, Lineker got in behind the back four, behind McCarthy, and was one-on-one. And to his eternal credit, Packy Bonner stood up and saved us.
Packy was a goal line goalkeeper. You know, now if you put a goalkeeper on the line, I can guarantee that he will have to stop shots. But if you stop him developing before they get to you, it doesn't happen anymore. And although Packy did well that day, and he saved a few shots.
To be honest, I genuinely do not know whether Packy got a bollocking or not. But I tell you what, he didn't. If he did, he didn't deserve it.
Beating England is very important. Obviously, like, it transcended the football field. I mean, to beat England was. It was cathartic for the entire nation. You know, it was. You know, I think in that one swoop, we kind of almost shed our inferiority complex.
Morning after the night before, Houghton had scored the goal. Ireland had beaten England. I was staying in Cologne, and the following morning I was going to do another game for television. Walking across in front of the cathedral, there were 4 Irish guys on the park bench, sleeping it off. One fella half awake. He said, "It's the merry man." So there's nothing for it, only go back to them and engage them. He said, "We have a question for you. Where's our bleeding hotel?"
was just so important to the Irish people. It was just, you know, like I wasn't around at the War of Independence, so it was like it was the nearest thing, you know, to that for me, I suppose.
I thought you were in the forecourts.
No, it wasn't.
I heard you were in the forecourts. Your brother took one in the thigh.
The game which followed against the Soviet Union was the best performance I'd seen from an Irish team abroad.
What happened that night is that the players adjusted. You had creative midfield players who were getting time on the ball and thought, well, I'm not just hoofing this anywhere, I'm going to pass it, I'm going to play. And we played unbelievable football that night. And really, we should have won comfortably, but that's in history. But in terms of performance, in my mind, that's the best one we've ever had.
It was adorned by a fabulous goal. A great strike by Ronnie Whelan. Maybe it did come off his shin, but so what the hell if it came off his shin? The fact that he got over the ball, and this was ecstasy.
The goal from Ronnie Whelan was a fluke, undeniably. At the time, RQ, not having the benefit of television replays at the time, we all thought it was great that he had cut the ball perfectly.
Got to play in that game, but it was the best I've ever seen an Irish team play. We matched what was a great Russian side, and I think we matched them for, you know, physically we matched them. You know, we ran them down.
I remember that there was the most blatant penalty I've ever seen when Tony Galvin ran through and the goalkeeper just came past the ball and flattened him and then went back and picked the ball up. and I couldn't believe that it wasn't a penalty.
Even on that night, Paul McGrath didn't play because his knee blew up, and Kevin Sheedy come in. And again, there was another guy who could pass the ball, Ronnie could pass the ball, and we were playing football. There was times when we played it long. You know, that was kind of, if you didn't do some of it, but Jack never said anything at the end about playing the football, about playing and passing the ball. He didn't kind of say, you shouldn't have done that, because he knew on the night we played fantastically well with a mixture of playing the ball long, but it was more of accuracy that night. But the general stuff was that we played good football. There was times when you needed to play it long, but we mixed it up, where previously that we hadn't. Everything had just been straight from the back to the front.
A draw against the Dutch in that final game of the group game
would have qualified us through.
Semi-final.
Yeah, well, I thought we were very unlucky in that game. I remember it was a very hot day, and whenever we played in heat, I used to try and get the lads as much of a rest as I could. So I'd say to Packy, don't pick the ball up and kick it straight up. Spend as much time as you want on the ball, dribble it across, give us a little break in the heat, and we can probably, we'll handle it that way.
We seemed to play a bit conservative, play for the draw with that day. Did Jack sort of send the team out in that frame of mind, do you think? Were the tactics like to play for the draw?
I'll give you a good answer to that. If you were Jack and you only needed a point and you were playing against a team as proficient as that Dutch team, what would you do? I mean, if they had gone out and attacked to the left gaps, who won the European Championship? Holland. Why did they win it? Van Basten, Gullit, Rijkaard. What a team.
I think that game was maybe beyond a lot of people's dreams, but we went into that game. It was the third game in the week again. You know, if we thought we were just surviving after the England match, after the Russian game, again, it was a short period. We played on the Sunday after playing on the Wednesday night. You have a bit of travelling to do to get to the next venue. But Dennis Mikkels, who reputed to be one of the greatest coaches ever, was desperate. He was throwing players on left, right and centre, taking defenders off, just throw everything at them.
And the scorer of that Dutch goal was a very obscure Dutch player, not well known to many people.
Well, he was Wim Kieft, and he was a top scorer in the Dutch league for Ajax and for PSV over a number of years. So I mean, he was a pretty good player, but he was an old-fashioned kind of centre-forward type, like tall and sort of a bit awkward. But he only came on 7 minutes, I think, from the end of time. We had defended magnificently throughout the game, and it really looked, you know, like it was possible that we were going to go into the semi-finals. And he scored this incredible fluky goal. I mean, it was a ridiculous goal. I mean, first of all, there was more than a hint of offside about it. But secondly, it was a miss kick by Koeman, which somehow or other it spun off Wim Kieft's like ridiculous shock of blondie hair, And it took a right angle and went into the goals around Packy. So there was absolutely no way Packy could have saved it, because it literally, like, it spun, it went around about 3 or 4 corners, and then it went in.
The ball looked to be going about 3 or 4 yards wide across the goals, and the ball bounced and suddenly kicked left, hit the inside of the post and went in the goals.
I mean, it was a freak goal. Yeah. And he scored that. And I met him a couple of weeks ago. I was doing this thing about Dutch football in Holland, and I happened to run into him. And I got him to admit on camera that he was actually ashamed by the quality of the goal.
We didn't deserve that, I felt, on the day. I felt we deserved a draw, and we didn't get it.
Kind of, we were devastated, but it was, again, we had gone beyond everybody's expectations. The disappointment was there for a couple of days, but it soon went, because you realised that you had achieved something in Irish history, Irish football history, not so much to do with European or world football, but in Irish football history, we'd done something.
Another milestone.
Well, we'd taken it to an extra level. We'd reached the success level, if you could call it success, that we'd not reached before. That was the first tournament we'd ever got to the finals of, and we were rated as rank outsiders. No, yeah. We had 3 points from the first 2 matches, and possibly embarrassment for a lot of media who'd written us off.
We had just lost, and the country was weeping and it was gnashing of teeth, and justifiably so, because the expectation, the people had got so excited. And I had just filed a report, and I'm coming down from the stand and I meet a well-known FAI official who said to me, "God," he said, "that was a bit too close for comfort." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You know, if we'd have held out," he said, "for another 8 minutes, we have qualified for the semi-finals." And I said, "Yeah, well, what was wrong with that?" He said, "But we've no money to go on." He said, we hadn't budgeted for getting to the semi-finals. He said, "We would have been in big trouble."
And do you think they acquitted themselves well in '88? I mean, obviously the win against England was made the tournament for most of us.
Exactly, Colm. That was it. To do that was it. Jack was going to be a god after that, you know, and of course, ironically, against his own countrymen, you know. But really, the whole nation, I know that. I mean, and myself as well. I was thinking, God, you know, that was because the England at the time were pretty cocky about things, and you know, they've got their own little bit arrogant way of carrying on, and so that was lovely to take them down a bit, you know.
In international football, for a manager, you're getting players in, and you have them for a very short period, and they're playing, you know, a different game at their clubs, maybe. I mean, John Aldridge is an example.
Yeah,
of
well,
that.
you've got to make the game very simple. It's got to be very simple, because all those players go to the clubs, they play the way the manager, the clubs want to play, and then they come back to us. So we had to invent a very simple game that people understood.
He would meticulously have 3 or 4 points about a game, and he knew that if we did those 3 or 4 things well, we were giving ourselves a serious advantage in the game.
Now, I had John Aldridge and Frank Stapleton up front most of the time in those games. Frank was a better header of a ball than John. So instead of Frank having to run for balls, we played to get to the ball to the fullback, and the fullback then would knock the ball into the space behind. We already knew that the ball was going to be knocked into the space behind, so John Aldridge or Frank Stapleton would already be on their way, having known where the ball was going to be played, and they would get to the ball first. Ray Houghton, who was the right-hand side, would then feed up the line. He would give him the ball. Ray could then knock it to the fullback, who would back them open. He could play the ball into the box, or Ray could play it. Or we could start to play from there, once we got the ball. But it was very important that we got somebody to the ball first. Now, Frank was a great header of the ball. I mean, one of the best header of the balls I've ever seen, Frank. John wasn't. John was a goal line, 6-yard man, you know, and he scored loads of goals for Liverpool and loads of goals for Oxford when we went to see him. John, so I used John as my runner.
John Aldridge used to say afterwards, you know, my legs are turning into tree stumps. I can't keep doing this running. I want to stay up here and score goals. But he soon knew if he did that, he wouldn't have been in the side.
John didn't have as much pace as I would have liked him to have had. But he understood what I wanted. And it was not a surprise to me that John didn't get as many goals as he was scoring with Liverpool at that time when he had moved to Liverpool, scoring top goal scorer. And because I used him as a runner. Get to the ball first, support him, and we'll play from there. And John did it remarkably well.
As we said earlier, you know, Packy had to be the sweeper where Mick and Kevin would push out all the time. And if a ball came to a forward and he was allowed turn, that defender would be taken off. That was as simple as that. That was the warning. Like, we've got to keep the forwards out in front of us. And it was amazing because the forwards would know that was coming. And it was amazing how they'd be looking over their shoulder as the ball was coming and you know, well, maybe a little bit frightened, but certainly they were put off their game because they knew you're playing Ireland now, this is going to come whack at you every time.
I always liked to play a centre-back who could play in centre midfield. And I had a load of centre-backs when I came here, and Mick McCarthy, Kevin Moran, there was Mark Lawrenson. So I played Mark in midfield, mainly because when you lose possession, and the ball goes to a winger who's going to cross the ball, if you played centre-back, you automatically drop back into a position.
Having midfield players who can drop back to play centre-back well.
If you ask any of that, they'll tell you Frank Stapleton used to drop back in the midfield, Mark Lawrenson dropped back into the back four, so you had a spare player in the back and you had another spare player in midfield taking his position. So it was, everything was okay. It was just a case of the players remembering what you'd asked them to do and what you told them to do.
I never heard him say, kick the ball straight up the field. Like, do you know the way you heard about this other famous long ball? He never said that. He always told you, I want to put balls into the corner, in between the edge of the penalty area and the flagpole. And when the defender then had to turn, and then when he turned toward his own goal, then he told the forwards, the likes of John Aldridge or Frank Stapleton, to close in on them. And that put them under pressure because the continental player, unlike the Irish or English player, never wanted to kick the ball out of touch. He always wanted to play the ball back infield again. And as a result, he wouldn't have the space to do it.
I think the system was better suited away from home because you weren't expected to be creative. But we played home and away the same. At home, your supporters could get on your back a little bit and get frustrated when things weren't happening. But away from home, teams just couldn't deal with it because I tended to play very, very deep in the system. John tended to stay up there on his own, John Aldridge, and I dropped into the midfield, make it 5, and we would just work across. And continental teams always play through the middle of the park. That's the way they brought up to play, and they tried to play through the middle, and we kept breaking it up and breaking up and breaking up. And our momentum then was taking us into their half. We were winning balls high up the pitch. And all of a sudden you're creating chances, and therefore that's where they come. And not giving too much away at the back because the system was great for the defenders because most of the stuff that was coming through, when you're closing down and they had to play the ball forward, the midfield was so closed up that they had to play it long, and that suited our centre-backs in particular. They come and attacked everything and they just dealt with it. So most of the stuff was high ball. They very rarely could play it through, and that's the way the system worked.
In Charlton's book, centre-backs were supposed to stay tight on the two central forwards. He felt that if the forward was allowed to turn with the ball, it opened up all kinds of dark possibilities. And his philosophy was hit them before they turned. But David O'Leary, this wasn't the game he played at Arsenal. This wasn't the game he thought he should be playing with Ireland. And because of that, his career internationally suffered. He left O'Leary out because he hadn't gone to Iceland, and because people like Kevin Moran and Mick McCarthy had done well. So he reckoned, I suppose with some justification, that they were the people who had gone to Iceland, they're the guys who had played well, they deserved to stay.
It was under your reign that Mick McCarthy first came into the side, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I brought Mick McCarthy into the scene when, you know, we might have, say, we had very good centre-backs. We had David O'Leary, we had Kevin Moran, we had Paul McGrath came slightly later, with Mark Lawrenson. I mean, take those three alone. But with players that respected themselves, respected each other maybe a little bit too much out there. It was all very well in the build-up in the hotel, everything was great. But when you get out there, I mean, you just need, say, a real leader, a fellow who could throw out a few B's and whatever and say, and that's what I brought McCarthy in for, because he was that person.
He was a shouter, yeah.
Yeah, he was a shouter, and he was a leader on the pitch. Like, I mean, you'd have, say, Mark Lawrenson, who wouldn't say boo to Liam Brady because, you know, he's a great player, I can't tell him off, and vice versa. Yeah. So I was aware of that, and that's one of the reasons that Mick McCarthy was introduced. And I was proven right, because, I mean, Jack kind of went with him as his captain and saw that that was what was needed. And I think any manager would say that. I mean, I did leave David O'Leary out because I didn't think that he was doing what was expected as an international centre-half at a particular time.
You dropped him, yeah?
Yeah, I dropped him against Iceland. That was the first time I think he was ever left out of any team, maybe. Because, you know, he's a very, very top-class footballer, there's no doubt about that.
When O'Leary eventually came back for a game against Spain in late '88, it was at the behest of Maurice Setters. And Setters apparently sat Jack Charlton down on the bed in the room. For 2 hours he argued why he should bring David O'Leary back. And eventually Charlton agreed and brought him back.
For the first World Cup held in 1930, all the entrants progressed straight to the finals. For the subsequent World Cups, from 1934 onwards, the qualifiers were the only means of entry. There were some hard-luck stories for the Irish in the preceding years, when bad refereeing decisions and the bounce of the ball didn't go our way. So, for the qualifiers for Italy 1990, would it be 13th time lucky for Jack Charlton and his Irish team? In a group that contained ourselves, along with Spain, Hungary, Malta and Northern Ireland, luck would have nothing to do with it. Frank, against West Germany in '89, Jack kind of, I suppose, famously or infamously substituted Liam Brady in that game. Do you think, was he a bit harsh on him?
I don't think he could have justified it, and he tried to afterwards, but he couldn't justify it. Because in that game, the Germans had a lot of the possession of the ball. They were keeping it and keeping it and keeping it. And we couldn't really get hold of it. They were playing a lot of square stuff, but they're very patient. And Liam chased somebody into the corner, right, into the right-hand side, and went to try and win the ball, and the guy came inside, and the ball was laid square about 30 yards out, and the guy come and cracked it into the top corner, and Packy had no chance. And Jack saw that as that Liam didn't look like he had the legs to deal with it, and he took him off. It was a friendly match after all. It wasn't a World Cup match. But I think considering what Liam had done for another 12 minutes or so, whatever, in fact, there's any number of people he could have taken off if that was his gripe. But to be fair, in Jack's book, he came out and said that it was premeditated. The situation, he'd set up both Liam, myself and Tony Galvin to finish our careers, it's in his book, which is an amazing thing. So, you know, he can't justify what he did. He had it in his mind to do something, and to do something controversial, and Liam was the one that he couldn't took me off because I scored, and then he scored another one.
The way the fans travelled, they were like ambassadors, you know. I mean, they enjoyed themselves, they were loud, they, you know, supported the team passionately, but there was never any trouble, there was never any, and at the same time you had the Dutch and the English fans going all over Europe causing havoc.
We want to identify ourselves as very different to the English, and I honestly believe that is one of the reasons, apart from our innate good-humoured nature, but that is one of the reasons, is because we want the world to perceive us as very different to the English. And this was one way of marking out our territory abroad, was to adopt a more carnivalesque type of attitude.
Qualifying out in Malta, and the surreal, like, amazing thing was, like, the crowd didn't really get there for the start of the game. All the flights were delayed because of fog in Dublin or something, and there was no week-long trips there. The Celtic Tiger hadn't kicked in. People were on day trips, and that was it. Like, you know, and it was funny because the crowd were coming in as the game was going on, and you could see people coming in with their suitcases, you know, and but the atmosphere was so good. You know, once I think Aldo scored early on, and you know, it was just a party time.
Irish people are very proud. We're a small country, and, you know, say politically, be it the United Nations or where, we box above our weight, and to see us being able to be up there, be it in rugby, soccer, obviously Gaelic when it comes to playing the Australian rules, I think there's a great pride in the country and pride in the jersey. And you know, there were people following Jack Charlton that had never watched football before.
This was our time to celebrate now. We knew we were going in, and there was a high there that, again, that surpass anything that even had happened in '88, because now we were at the big one. We'd been to Europe.
This is the World Cup.
This is the world stage, and it was quite amazing. And that night, I think in Valletta, well, it was. I mean, it literally, you know, our physio Mick Byrne and Charlie O'Leary trying to get us out of places to get on the bus to go home to make the flight the next day. You know, it was just an amazing time.
Yeah, so you had a good party in Valletta.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Sticks nightclub.
I love that, one night in Valletta.
One night in Valletta.
I'll never forget it. For the World Cup in 1990, the romance that is Jack Charlton and the Irish team had gripped the nation. It might have been our first World Cup, but it was a story of deja vu when we had to meet England again in our first match on a stormy night in Caligari. Just to complicate matters more, our old friends the Dutch, who beat us in Euro '88, were also in the group. But Jack and his green army of fans were to safely navigate the choppy waters of what was potentially a banana-skin group. He would bring his team all the way to the quarter-finals, where he would have a showdown with the Italian hosts in the Eternal City. And for good measure, they even got to meet the Pope.
We deserve to be where we are. You know, we've qualified for a World Cup. We are now amongst the world's elite. And if we keep doing what we're doing, we deserve to be going places, you know. And although a lot of us still didn't believe it and stuff like that, especially with like I say, the style of football we were playing, we actually started to have faith in what Jack was saying, and he got us places we never thought we'd be.
Bobby Robson, lovely man, brilliant football connoisseur. You know, he knew football inside out, but he could never, it seemed to me, motivate his players quite as much as Charlton could on the big occasion.
You went to the World Cup in the squad, but you didn't play. Do you feel let down, or that you didn't get to play in that tournament? Do you think Jack was a bit harsh on you there?
I was disappointed, obviously. I just thought that, not just particularly for myself, I just thought the fringe players weren't treated very well. If you weren't involved in the first 11, first 12, whatever it was kind of, you were discarded. And I was disappointed. I didn't expect that it would be ever first choice. But I thought that sometimes what was needed, particularly the game like Egypt, was something a little bit different.
Egypt did to us what we had done to some, stifled us, didn't let us play, cut down on our chances, made sure the 2 or 3 players round the ball anytime danger threatened, and effectively shut us out of the game.
And they were defending so well, and they actually played fantastically, I have to say. Defensively, they were brilliant.
Niall, it's Thursday, 21st of June, 1990. We're 1-0 down against the Dutch. What happened next?
Just before we got the goal, I can remember Tony Cascarino coming on, and I thought, oh, here we go, I'm being taken off again. And I really felt there was a goal in me. And but for some reason, Jack put the two of us on together, which he very seldom did over the years. You can go back all of the amount of times, it was always me for him or vice versa. And he left the two of us on the pitch at the time. And it almost, you could see we were marking a couple of little Dutch lads who started getting smaller as the two of us sort of were starting to go for things. And I can, like, don't remember an awful lot about it. I see it on TV the odd time where, you know, Packy's a real grimacing face, you know, and he punts the ball up nearly 70, 80 yards. Ben Arl, I think, was the fullback or somebody like that who mistimed his clearance, which went back towards his goalkeeper, Hans van Breukelen, who was at Nottingham Forest, who I knew, and I just ran in on the off chance, hoping he might spill it. He did, and I scored.
When Niall scored, there was a clash, and the keeper and thing was that. So I had to go in. So I put the word, as I was going in, that both of us qualified, if it's dead the same way.
The game got played out farcically after that. No one told me for 10 minutes I was still running around trying to get my second goal. You know, I wasn't. It was never going to happen, even with the game half stopped.
But something did leak onto the pitch that involved both England and Egypt, which meant that we were both through. We just relaxed, and all of a sudden everyone took their foot off the pedal.
And I can remember some years later meeting Hans van Breukelen, and he just came up to me and he said, "You should be buying me drinks for the rest of my life," because he'd
thrown
the ball to me, and he was actually right in a way. Yeah. I remember it being the hottest day I can imagine. I can remember being full of energy at one point in the game, thinking I'm going to last so long now, and then late on in extra time when we hadn't made the breakthrough, thinking, my God, I'm going to faint here, someone's going to have to come in and drag me off this pitch. It was literally the most physically demanding game I've ever played in. It was incredible. And little Hadji used to get the ball off the goalkeeper and run to the edge of our box and have a shot. And because I was the first man to go and close him down, I had to run back in his wake 60, 70 yards until he'd done it. And then I had to get back up for the kick out. Yeah. And then they'd roll it back out to Hadji again. And it just spun around in my head all day.
The Republic of Ireland team is involved in a penalty shootout.
Niall Quinn fancied himself as a goalkeeper. And he would go in, when the lads had finished training, he'd go into goal and he would bet them maybe a tenner that they couldn't score 2 out of 3 against them.
Every day after training, I just used to have a little punt with the lads. I would get in goal, and if they scored 3 penalties, if they got the 3 of them, I'd give them a tenner. If they missed one of them, I'd get the tenner. So that went on, and like some days there could be like 40, 50 penalties, and it'd be the same faces came up to try and take the money all the time.
It wasn't so much the penalty practice, it was the idea of taking 10 quid off Niall Quinn.
Because we were struggling to find 5 people who were going to take him. I remember going up to Tony Cascarino and saying, "You're taking one," and Cass said, "Well, I don't really want to." And I said, "Well, if I'm taking one," I said, "I've never taken a penalty before in any competition. You know, I've never taken one in the league where I've been playing for a number of years." I said, "So I'm putting myself up for one. You're a striker, you can put yourself up." And finally agreed to take it, and we were struggling to get numbers.
I was prowling up and down the sideline. I think I prayed to everyone, St. Anthony, all the saints in heavens I prayed to, that we'd come through this. And next I walks down to him, and he was going like that.
Until we saw O'Leary, David O'Leary, stride forward. And people said, surely not him.
This kick can decide it all. The nation holds its breath.
He had some sort of a Cold War with David O'Leary, but life has a funny way of answering you back. David O'Leary, who couldn't get a game in that Italia 90, was on the bench for the famous match in Genoa against Romania. And he'd come on in the very last minute to replace, I think it was Steve Staunton. So now David O'Leary was on the field, finally getting a game.
And I believe, and I've never heard O'Leary say this, but I believe that he had a point to prove to Charlton after Iceland in '86. 4 years on, he hadn't forgotten. And he sensed this was his opportunity. And if he missed, so be it. He was a centre-back taking a penalty when nobody else was volunteering. So he reckoned the percentages were in his favour. If he went up and scored, he was a hero. If he missed, he was a defender, you know, who had a bottle to go up and take when forwards were opting out.
1 to go.
Yes, we're there! Ireland are through to the quarterfinals of the World Cup.
But we tend to forget there was 5 penalty takers that day. You know, we forget Kevin Sheedy took one, Andy Townsend took one. We always remember David's last penalty and the fact that Packy made the save. But to get David into that position, 4 others had to take the penalty as well.
During Italia 90, I know that the Irish team had an audience with the Pope, or some of the Irish team might just say the Pope was given an audience with them.
Mick Byrne came to me and he said, "Our boss," he said, "when we get to Rome, you'll get us in to see the Pope, won't you?" Well, that was where the final was going to be played, and I didn't think we had a prayer again to the final.
Right.
So I said, "If we get to Rome, I'll get you in to see the Pope."
He said, "No problems, Mick." I don't think he thought we were going to qualify, to be honest with you. But anyway, we qualified. So I said, "Right, we've got to go and see the Pope." He said, "No, take it easy, take it easy."
Now, I thought an audience with the Pope was that you're going to a room, big room, and he would come in and bless the lads, say a prayer, And then you would have some pictures taken, you have a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, and we would give him a ball and a shirt we'd got signed for him and everything. You know, I thought that was where it would be. It's not. The audience chamber and room holds 7,000 people. It's immense. It's as big as a football ground. Yeah. And we went down the central aisle. Everybody stood up. There were people there from all over the world. And our seats had actually been placed on the stage.
I was the last in because I was getting everyone through. And I was the last in, and there was no seat on the other. And Frank Stapleton was sitting in the front. Frank got up off his seat and allowed me to sit in the front.
And then all of a sudden everybody goes, shh, 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 the Pope's coming, he's coming. And sure enough, he came through the door at the back and walked straight to the centre of the stage, to the microphones, blessed the audience, and then read his lesson in Latin for about 20 minutes. And then he went and sat on his throne, which was from me 10 yards away, went and sat on his throne. And then another bishop got up and repeated what he had said in Portuguese for 20 minutes. There were 6 bishops got up and repeated what the Pope had said in his lesson in 6 different languages, because everybody in the place were from different parts of the world, different languages. And we sat through this, and I found it very hard to stay awake.
Sure.
Oh, God. And I was very aware because there was a bank of photographers over the other side.
And you're the
and
next guy
I
over
thought
from
it'd
the
be
Pope.
just be like the thing, you know, that does off, that somebody takes a picture and it's on the front page of the News of the World Other People. Jack Charlton meets the Pope, you know. So I'm fighting like hell to stay awake.
Jack, I think for all the study that he was doing on teams and stuff like that, Jack felt a little bit tired and stuff like that. So eventually he kind of did nod off a little bit.
Mick gives me an elbow and goes, so everyone looks, and Jack is nodded off, right? So the Pope is finishing up and he's giving his blessing.
The Pope was on the 3rd bit of his blessing, and he was looking right at me, and he had his hand in the air like that. And as I woke up, I thought he was waving at me, so I stood up and went back. Oh, dear. I tell you, it was serious.
Playing the host country in Rome, in a stadium like the Olympic Stadium in Rome, he felt that he was going to get no breaks whatever off the referee. And he told me, he said, I sat under, pointing to a tree in the grounds where the hotel was, the day before the match. He said, I told Maurice Sellers last night, we were discussing the match, and we agreed that we'd get nothing off the referee, and any frees we got would be in our half of the field. He said, we felt that the referee was going to do us no favours. And he said, that's the way it turned out.
I think we gave Italy a real good run for the money. I mean, at times we did everything but score, and many people have said it to me from the world of football away from Ireland. You know, to see the likes of Franco Baresi scarpering around the place, totally out of sync. Nobody near him, hacking the ball clear, not understanding who was around him, just totally panicking, meant that we did something to the Italians that night. You know, I know we didn't beat them, and people will say, oh, you didn't beat them, but we had them on the rack for long periods.
Until the fateful move that came 3/4 length of the field that ended with Schillaci scoring.
Challenge, Baggio to Schillaci. Giannini looks for Donadoni. Good parry. Schillaci. Schillaci has scored again.
I remember Zenga making a great save from a Quinney header. It looked like it was in top corner, and the keepers pulled it out. And we were a little bit lucky as well, because they had a perfectly good goal to go 2-0 up, which wasn't given.
If we'd have had a bit of more belief in ourselves, that we could have gone on and we could have attacked them more and just got at them and put them under pressure, as Jack always said, then I genuinely believe we could have beat them.
I think when we come off the pitch, there was a lot of tears in the changing room afterwards, and I think that came from the fact that we hadn't really gone that extra yard, you know, and that was a major problem. And that's what we always say, you know, don't regret anything, you know, make sure that you come off the pitch thinking, well, we were just beaten by the better side. I'm not so sure.
We were in the dressing room and it was over. And you could hear a pin drop, and a couple of lads, you know, hurt at losing would throw their boots on the wall, and nobody was saying it. You couldn't hear a murmur, and that's the truth. And I remember lads would have towels over their head and just looking at the sort of ground. And And the doors burst open, and our great leader at the time, Charles Haughey, came in. He had Brian Lenihan behind him and a few other of his colleagues. And those of us who were brought up in Ireland just stood in amazement, you know, because this was, you know, going real far now. And he made a sort of a speech about sporting sons of Ireland, and I can't quite remember how it went, but it was totally, you know, hair on the necks kind of stuff. And Tony Cascarino was getting changed beside me, and Tony went really loud, killed the moment. He went, "Who the fuck's that?" So I kind of went, "Oh my God," like, you know, nearly dying for him. And I went, "That's the Taoiseach," you know, and Andy Towns was on the other side, and he went, "Who is it, Kaz?" Like, you know, really loud for everyone to hear. And he went, "I don't know. Quinny says he owns a tea shop."
As a politician, was it kind of advantageous to have a photo op with Jack Charlton? I mean, one remembers Charlie Haughey doing his great tour, lap of honour with the team, and
I've always had sort of mixed feelings about those opportunities, because people will know that you're there purely to exploit the goodwill factor of the successful coach. But Charlie was always up for the opportunity. I mean, you might recall Rome, he was just being himself, but you remember when Stephen Roach won the Tour de France, I mean, for all practical purposes, it looked like Charlie had won it himself. And it was a pity he didn't do a lap of honour after the Tour de France, you know. He'd stayed out of the country for a long time.
Yeah, on a bike.
Yes, preferably.
Yes.
I can remember, I suppose, around 1990 when I think I first started to run internationally for Ireland, and I remember going away to races and coming home and there not being anybody at home, you know, because everybody was out watching the soccer matches, the 1990 World Cup, and it was just an amazing thing. It wasn't just for Irish sport, but I think for Irish people in general, and maybe more people just became interested in Irish sport because of the influence he had on the Irish team, and then also on getting the support of the people behind the team.
And there's a story about after one particular World Cup, you had an incident with the police while you were fishing, yeah?
We were fishing above the bridge in Galway, and I was looking forward to getting to this place right under the bridge where I knew the fish were lying. And I was fishing away down the thing, and then I came to a stone, looking over where exact spot where I wanted to fish. So I just put my backside against the stone, and I started to fish. And all of a sudden, there's a guy comes down the bank, and he stands on the bank, and he shouted, "Mr. Jack, you've got to come out of the water." I said, no. I said, this is the place I've been waiting on, to get to.
Get me spot here.
Get me spot here. I said, I'm fishing away. He said, "Come on, you got to come out of the water." And I said, "No, I'm not coming out of the water." And he waded in. He didn't have anything on except his clothes, and he waded in. He said, "You got to come out of the water." He said, "The Garda are up there." He said, I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Apparently you've stopped all the traffic all the way through Galway." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, look up." And I looked up, and it was packed on top of the bridge. And apparently the traffic couldn't get across the bridge because everybody was watching me fish. And I only caught one fish on that thing, and it was about that big, a little roach. And I held it up, and they all took pictures of it, and it was in one of the magazines.
It was a great time for Irish flags, and people were just proud to be Irish, and not only in Ireland, but I think, you know, Irish people all over the world, they just kind of had this massive army that showed up everywhere, and you know, they just wanted to show people, you know, that we're Irish and we're proud of it, and we've got a great soccer team. And I think, you know, Jack Charlton definitely was a big influence on that, and you know, he probably lifted the expectations of the people of, you know, generally they're Irish people can be happy to go along and take part in the World Cup. I think Jack Charlton definitely had high expectations for the team, and he definitely pushed them to their limits.
I was with a friend of mine called Dennis Woodhead, and we went, and Dennis said, "Do you fancy a pint of Guinness?" And I said, "Dennis, now we're in the Republic, we'll have a pint of Guinness." So we went in, parked the car, and walked across to this saloon bar, and I went to open the door, and the door opened in front of me, and it was an Irishman about 6'4" with a beautiful head of grey hair, big man. And he looked down at me and he went, "Ah, Jack." He said, "It's great you to come to my redundancy party." He said.
Quick as a flash. It's ironic that for the European qualifiers in Sweden in '92, when Jack Charlton and the Irish team were at their best and most professional, and when they should have been able to draw on the experience of 2 previous successful qualifying campaigns, they blew it at home and away to Poland. And in case we weren't getting used to them, fate had us again paired with England. Now, even at this stage, the group could have been salvaged. But Lady Luck was on the side of our English neighbours when they were fortunate to get a 1-1 draw in Wembley, a match which should have been the crowning moment of Jack Charlton's Irish managerial career.
When we went to Wembley later on and played England, I remember I think we drew 1 each at Wembley when Niall Quinn scored the goal late in the game. And a journalist wrote in one of the papers that he felt sick when he saw me leap up.
Oh, really?
I mean, what did he expect me to do?
Of course, yeah.
It was a dream fixture for us, and as a kid who watched the cup final religiously, any game that was on in Wembley, I watched, and loved. Here I was, sort of representing my country against the old enemy. It was a marvellous time, and we were all playing so well. I think we played as well that night, I think, as we ever played, and we passed them to death.
Some of the football that night was absolutely fantastic, and even the England players afterwards, had said themselves how lucky they were to get away with a draw. And I think if we had won that game, we would have qualified in '92 for that campaign as well.
And even the game in Dublin, we didn't win the game, and it's those little things that, suddenly you start questioning yourself or your teammates and thinking, maybe we're a bit past it and stuff like that. And I think even Jack suddenly started thinking, Jesus, these are not, the group of players that I had, although he felt loyal to us, I think we were starting to let him down a little bit.
It was a very old friend of mine, very, very sick and high. He eventually died in hospital. And I invited him along. I said, Jack, he's a personal friend. He hasn't long to live, which he didn't have. Is it possible? He said, on one condition, Charlie. If you get a car, bring me up to, it was in his house, he was, because there wasn't long from left. Would you get a car, tell nobody about it, because I don't want a big crowd around me. So my son got another lad to pick him up, brought him up to the house to see the man. And on the bedside was a bowl of nuts. And Jack, while he's talking to the man, he's eating the nuts, you see. And while he's eating the nuts, he's chatting away about fishing, football, and the devil knows what. And at the end of the session, he noticed, I'm terribly sorry, but I think I'm after eating all your nuts. And the man said, don't be worried. It took me 2 weeks to suck the chocolate off them,
Denmark, who had surprisingly won the European Championships in 1992, were in our qualification group for the World Cup '94. To make matters worse, Spain and Northern Ireland were also there. After a hard-fought 0-0 draw with the Spanish in Seville, Ireland were to surrender their advantage when they pushed the self-destruct button in the corresponding fixture at Lansdowne Road, losing 3-1. As a result, this group was to go down to the wire, with a nervy, nail-biting finish on a famous November night in Windsor Park in 1993. When Northern Ireland went a goal up, Jack Charlton and his team looked into the abyss.
From a situation in the, say, the 80s, when Northern Ireland qualified for 2 World Cup finals from that situation. They were very definitely the top dogs in the island, but that began to change once Jack Charlton got going. We had proved it in the preliminaries for the 1990 World Cup. So yeah, we did expect to get a result, and yet the political and civil situation in Northern Ireland had settled a little bit by 1993, but there was still a certain kind of backdrop to the game.
I think the Spanish game in Dublin was a wake-up call for me anyway. I wanted to play centre-half. I think Jack knew that I wanted to play centre-half. I think the fact that Spain scored so many goals so quickly in the space of like 20 minutes, I think there were three up. The frustration that I felt that night was palpable. I think everyone in the stadium could feel it. I wanted to play centre-half. I wanted to stop what was happening to us. Eventually I went back to centre-half that night, and you know, it was a little bit late, but I was thrilled then to be at centre-half, that Jack would actually switch. And again, respect to Jack Charlton, because he was big enough man to say, you know, put him back there now.
You see, there was a feeling in that, at the start of the World Cup qualifiers, that people like Paul McGrath, for example, were reaching towards the end. And Paul in particular was a key man, you know, and remained a key man. And these questions were about, will you get another year out of Paul? Whenever we went away, I remember that he would always delegate players to look after Paul in the off-duty hours, to make sure that Paul was all right.
I wasn't allowed out where all the other players were allowed. I remember, like, even when we used to travel to different countries all around the world, and all the lads would be getting dickied up for the night out and stuff like that, and he'd have someone sitting on the door, you know, basically guarding me. I wasn't allowed out. I used to be allowed to look out the window and watch them all getting into taxis. And
I remember Andy Townsend saying after one of these times when Charlton said to me, "You look after Paul tonight," and Townsend said, "Oh yeah, we look after him," because he said, "I think we all know that we're a better team when Paul's in it than when he's not."
After the defeat at home by Spain, you had to go to Belfast and get a result up there against Northern Ireland, and obviously, given the political situation and the relations between Belfast and Dublin, it was kind of going to be a fiery night. Was it a very difficult night?
It wasn't difficult for me because I didn't expect anything. I mean, the fact that the police took us on the bus, and instead of going straight to the ground, we went round the big hill behind Belfast, if you remember, and came back in and came the other way. Wow. And it took us about an hour longer than we should have done to get to the ground.
From a security point of view, it was high risk. I mean, it's a game that we would have liked to have gone to on behalf of the government, right, but it just was not considered. Yeah. We were told very firmly that it just wasn't on. Yeah. That and the tension was palpable. I mean, right through the game.
And the things they're shouting at us, unreal, you know, vile. They're shouting at us about Antichrist, popes, bastards, Fenians and all, and that's what's coming up. Jack walks over to the railings, to them, and he walks over. He got a cigarette. You know, there's a dash to them. They're all looking in the pocket of a cigarette for them. And he said, "Thanks," and goes to another group, "Any chance of a light?" And then there's a gas stand, and all of a sudden that whole area wanted it. Inside of 2-3 minutes, he had that little section eaten out of his hand.
It also, I suppose, highlighted the depth of bitterness and hatred that exists in Northern Ireland, and which had to be overcome. Yeah. And I've always been a great believer that, you know, sport is a great healer, and you get people playing together from totally different political persuasions. Yes. And in fact, Gaelic football back in Kerry in the 1920s was a great healer in the post-Civil War situation. Guys who had been fighting opposite sides got together again for the pride of the county. But unfortunately, in Northern Ireland, on that occasion, you know, it just showed the worst of the sectarian problems.
I remember Billy walking across the pitch, you know, tight as a drum. Billy Bingham, yeah. You know, tight as a drum, and he's to the crowd, and the crowd are all reacting to him and everything.
There's no way Northern Ireland was going to lie down and die and let us win to qualify. We had to go out there and do everything that we could, and I remember when Jack brought me off in the game, I was really annoyed because I didn't think I was playing that badly, and I thought there was other players on the pitch who might have been playing a little bit worse than myself.
I thought we were doing okay. We'd had a few chances, and we looked the better side on the night. I do remember that, and then they scored
against the run play,
and then we needed a goal back.
Because the lad who went on for me, Alan McLaughlin, you know, done terrific when he scored the goal. And
Alan was very good straight to the ball, and he hit a beautiful ball in, right in by the far post. And then we were through.
Thanks. Thanks. You had us on and tender hoops there.
We did qualify to play in America, which we were delighted to have to do, because I mean I knew that how much it would have meant to the Irish to actually now they could go and visit all their relatives in America.
FIFA, in their wisdom, or probably more for market reasons and to bring the World Game to a bigger audience, decided to have the '94 World Cup in the USA. But these matters didn't concern Jack Charlton and the Irish. In the opening game, they were paired against Italy, who had beaten them in the quarter-finals in the '90 World Cup. Would Ireland gain revenge over the Italians, who were one of the pre-tournament favourites? It was left to the hero of Stuttgart from 6 years previously to seize the moment. That moment came when Ray Houghton's shot from outside the box left the Italian keeper, Paluca, grasping air. Giant Stadium in New Jersey had never witnessed anything like it.
On the morning that we flew out to America, I had breakfast with Big Jack and the team out in the airport hotel there. And I remember distinctly his last words, we were getting up to go out to get a coach to go to the airport, and I said, how do you feel? And he said, a bit apprehensive, he said. You know, he said, I'd nearly settle if we get one big result here. He said, I'd nearly settle for that. He said, just one, the one result, he said, and I'd be happy enough. Little did he know.
In the build-up to going out to America, I hadn't been inside. Jason McAteer was playing on the right-hand side of midfield, and you know, all the pundits and all the media people had said that he'll be starting. So I decided when the season finished to get myself really fit.
The first game of the World Cup in '94, the Italian game, that was an important day for you in a personal way as well as...
Yeah, no, I was off in England. I just emigrated to England in '94 to sort of do comedy properly in clubs and that. So I was, you know, working my arse off trying to get off the ground over there, and then the World Cup happened. So you know, I was coming back for the matches. So my girlfriend, she picked me up from the airport. It was the day of the Italy match, and she picked me up from the airport. And on the way into town, I was so excited that I actually just asked her to marry me, and I hadn't been planning it at all. And she said yes, and we had a great day. Then we went off to a friend's house, and there was about 20 of us there in the house, and it was just a.
And did you announce your engagement
day.
at watching the match?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Lovely.
But that's the kind of thing that would happen to me with football. I would get very excited. I mean, you know, we like...
So how many times have you asked people to marry you?
Hundreds of times. Yeah, even at club games now, even at Talca Park.
This is the only one you went through with?
Yeah. But because it was such a big game.
I asked her to marry me at Talca Park.
Well, it was actually, we were just passing Talca Park at the time. I think I saw a floodlight and I went, it just, something went off in my head.
And it was Kevin Moran who actually said to me a couple of days before the game, he said, I think you've got a chance of starting, you know. He says, I would start you anyway. He says, because having seen you out here, I think that you're back to your best. And, you know, I think Jack feels the same way as well. So I just said, well, time will tell.
We knew the quality they had, you know, the Baggios and the Barresis and stuff like that. But having said that, we kind of went out there kind of fearless. Walking out into the stadium to see the amount of Irish that were there was just unbelievable. And it's kind of like you got an extra player suddenly.
First game of the '94 World Cup in New York, for me it was the absolute pinnacle of that side and the Charlton era and all that. And it's the most expensive football match I ever went to. I'd been living in the States for like 12 years, waiting for soccer, and I'm watching Mexican League games on the television and stuff like that, and missing soccer terribly. And finally, soccer comes to America, you know. And where am I? I'm in Dublin. I was doing filming a mini-series here. And I was working on the Friday and I was working on the Monday, and I called Ray Tracy, who is a great organiser of anything to do with football. And Ray told me the only way I could make it to the match, because I had the tickets on, I had 8 tickets, but I was stuck in Dublin. The only way I could get there was to go on Concorde. I'm like, what? And he says, yeah, it'll get you there. I said, will it get me back in time for Monday morning? Yeah, no problem. So Ray booked the whole thing for me, and I left here at like 7 o'clock to London. Got into London at 8:15 or whatever, and then over to Terminal 4 on Concorde at 9:15. Arrived in New York at 8:15 their time. Went to the hotel. My buddies were meeting up in this hotel. We went, and it was the most. I say this without a shadow of a doubt, and I hope my children will forgive me and all the rest of it, but it was the happiest day of my life, you know.
It's not easy. Onto it comes Houghton. And Houghton with the shots, and it's there!
Ball just came to me. I've thought about trying to pass it to Steve Staunton, but he was marked on the left-hand side, and I don't know, it's like something that happens in football, as I said earlier. You just don't know why things conspire to happen the way that they do, but I just thought, hit it, why not? You know, I've hardly ever hit a left foot shot like it prior to it, or even after it, but you know, when it went into the back of the net, it was just sheer elation.
When Ray scored the goal, I mean, he surprised everybody, including me. When he ran from the right, cut inside, went inside again, got the edge of the box, went to kick a ball with his left foot, and it finished up low, and the goalkeeper had come off his line, it went over the goalkeeper and dropped into the back of the net, and you go.
Beautiful.
Well, it was lucky.
I don't know.
I was there. Ray would never be able to do it again, let's put it that way.
Italy were always vulnerable. They were always fragile, and continue to this day. At the start of a major tour, the finals, they got better as it goes on. Yeah. So really, we did cast.
We got them on the right day.
Oh yeah, but having said that, like, wasn't it marvellous?
Keane. He's got away from his marker. Points in the middle.
Sean Sheridan had the best chance of the game at the end. He hit the bar with it, didn't he? Yeah. Just had to knock it into the goals, and he knocked it into the empty goals into the crossbar. Yeah. Otherwise, we would have been 2-0 instead of 1.
And 1 was good enough.
Yeah, 1 was good enough, and it's not many teams beat people like
Italy, exactly.
What we know for sure now, history has been made in the Giant Stadium.
And after the game, when the media lads came up to me and said, you know, your goal celebration, why did you do what you did? I was looking at them saying, what are you on about? And it took 15 minutes or so for it to actually, you know, settle into my brain that what I'd done, and then I realised and thought, oh my God.
If you remember, the referee wouldn't let us give water to the players.
That's right.
Yeah. And Tommy Coyne, who played very, very well in that game, he ran like hell, Tommy, and he was the one that was drawn off to go for drug test, and they gave him water and water and water until he flooded his kidneys, because he was, you know, and they put Tommy onto the plane in a chair. Wow. And he was very ill for a while. Yeah. And mainly because, you know, they wouldn't let him. He
couldn't take water during the game.
He couldn't take during the game, and he'd given him as much as he wanted after the game. And they told me that he flooded his kidneys and he couldn't pee, and they couldn't get anything out of it, and they wouldn't let him out until he had actually peed in the bottle.
The World Cup should have never been played in America. Not for the Europeans in any way. I mean, 125 degrees in Florida we were playing because the temperature, the thermometer was right at the dugout, right beside me.
There was talk about me not playing against Mexico as well because I had a shoulder injury which was carried over from the Italian game as well. And I actually shouldn't have played. But I mean, I've never known heat where we were in an air-conditioned locker room. So now we walk out into the actual stadium and suddenly your shirts are turning a different colour because the sweat is rolling off you. You haven't moved yet.
We were never going to win that game. I felt we were never going to win the game. It was too hot for us. I mean, people like Stephen Staunton and the rest of the lads, we went and I woke up and I looked out in my bedroom window in the morning, and it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and sun was beating down. And I thought, oh, and we kicked off at 12 o'clock, which is the hottest part of the day.
This cannot be what we're going to play in now. And obviously, the Mexicans were, you know, and I say this to people and they think I'm joking about it and stuff like that. They were laughing at us. The Mexicans were running around having a laugh because they knew that we couldn't move in that sort of heat.
And was the kick-off time for TV, or was it? I mean, why not play the game in the evening?
I have no idea. You tell it. I mean, television virtually run the World Cups and things now. They dictate when they'll play and who they'll play and where they'll play to suit themselves. I mean, that's they put in a lot of money, guaranteed. But Mexico were a good side. That's some very good players, and they were used to the heat.
And I know the medical people and all got involved in it after that. And it was after that that FIFA changed the rule that under extreme heat and stuff like that, you were allowed give water into the players.
Sheridan and McAteer. Back for Aldridge. Yes, that's it.
Goal difference was very tight. And as it happens, we scored a goal and finished up 2-1 instead of 2-0. And that qualified us through when we went up and drew with Norway in New York again.
The Dutch game in particular was not something you could blame on you know, support or the management or anyone else, but the players, you know, it was goalkeeping mistakes and player mistakes, you know. And our lads, Terry Phelan would hold his hands up, I'm sure, and say, you know, he made a mistake. That happens in football, you know, you have to accept it. If it happens, you know, it could have been up the other end. And that day I thought I scored a perfectly good goal that, you know, on another day might have been given. It was one of those days that nothing was going to go our way.
All good things must come to an end. And so it was for Jack Charlton and his great team. 1995 had started so well with victory over Portugal in the European qualifiers. But the start of the year was also marred by the ugly scenes when English fans rioted in Lansdowne Road, with Ireland winning 1-0, resulting in the game being abandoned. An unbelievable away draw against Liechtenstein started the rot, when a group that was winnable was concluded, with Ireland finishing in second place. That meant we needed to win a playoff game in Liverpool in an emotionally charged game with the Dutch. A night when the old stadium at Anfield would echo to the sound of the fields of Athenry. A night when Jack Charlton and the Irish fans said a tearful goodbye to each other. You played England 4 times and plus that one ill-fated friendly, but you never lost to
England, no. The one I remember most of all was the one when we invited them back to come and play us in Dublin. And there was all that aggravation and carry on and trouble. And it was, I was most upset
I'm sure.
In that particular game. I remember going on the field and trying to get people to get off the pitch and clear it, and looking up into the stand and watching somebody fighting up there, and you're going, oh God, what's going on here, you know.
bizarre results come up from time to time, but one of the most bizarre, I'm sure, in your career with Ireland was to go to Liechtenstein and draw with Liechtenstein. How did that happen?
Do you know that happened because Alan Kelly made a breathtaking save in the 92nd minute? Otherwise, we'd have been beaten 1-0. We actually nicked a point in the last minute, but I think, yeah, we had 37 shots on target. The goalkeeper saved them all. We had 27 off target. We camped in their half. We all just had an off day, and it was a real jolt.
If we'd have been winning 5-0 after 10 minutes, nobody would have argued. We had so many chances and so many. Niall Quinn put 2 past the post when he was a yard off the post and wrong side, and we dominated the game from start to finish. They played they played the type of game you'd never experienced before. They just kicked the ball in the direction in which they were playing, and they were humping balls out over the wrong crossbar, putting them across the goals.
We'd lost heroically before, or we'd drawn heroically, or we'd won heroically, or we'd scraped a win, but it would do. But this was the first time, you know, this put a glitch in the system.
I came in at half time and I was livid, you know, I was going potty with our players. And Andy Townsend said, well, instead of shouting at him, boss, why don't you just tell us how to put it right? And I thought, he's dead right, you know, I shouldn't be in here shouting at the players. You know, if it's there, it's my job to put it right. But it was so frustrating that a team as bad as them could hold us even to a draw at half-time. And then we went the rest of the game, and we got worse as the game went on. I don't know why, but we didn't make as many chances as we had done the first half. And we finished up in the draw. And I said to the players after, that'll cost us qualification.
We had it in our power to qualify for that group. I think we're the best team in the group. We did everything in our power to hand it over to the Portuguese or the Austrians, anyone who wanted it, really. So it was frustrating, really, that we'd given up the situation where we could have qualified comfortably. We made a mess of that, and then we continued to keep faltering and make a mess of the next stage that we're involved in, which was the Portuguese away. Northern Ireland do us a favour, and we still find, even though we're getting hammered, you know, I think it was 3-0 or 3-1 or something in Portugal. And all of a sudden we realised then someone's given us a lifeline, so we've still got a chance.
But it was to end at with the playoff against the Dutch for the European Championships of '96, and Anfield that night was an extraordinary. It turned out to be Jack's last game.
It was an emotive occasion. And he would still look back on that and think, first of all, we were without several key players for a match of that importance. So it was a pretty threadbare performance. And Cliver, as you know, got 2 goals. But it was very emotional because we had beaten, and Jack knew before the game there had been kind of the insinuation, let's put it, the innuendo had been made that unless we got out of this match, that he was for the high jump.
I think a lot of us actually thought about that. You know, although you didn't want to say anything about it, or you didn't even want to think it really, because it had been such an adventure. Jack Charlton had been the makings of a lot of players, you know, young and old. He'd actually made our careers. He'd made us household names in Ireland and England. And it was hard to think of, but I think a lot of us actually that night knew that it was, you know, it was the last days of our football careers were coming up.
We lost the game 2-0, and well, I mean, for me, the Dutch on the night were, we'd hardly made a chance in the game. You've got to accept it. And then I went into the players, and we just sat in the dressing room, and we were getting changed and everything. And then somebody come and said to me, "Would you come out back on the pitch?" I said, "What for?" He said, "The crowd won't go home."
I think everybody knew that a great era had come to an end, and my goodness, it was a great era. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this program if it wasn't a great era. So that's the proof of it. And it was a very emotional night, very emotional. That, you know, I don't think Jack is a man who displays his emotion, but deep down I think he could be quite an emotional man. He doesn't like to display it. He's a bit more macho than that. But I think he pretty was near to tears on that particular night, because the emotion was dripping out of the whole place. And Anfield, of all places, where they know about singing football anthems, I suppose, more than anybody else, whether You'll Never Walk Alone. But here we had The Fields of Athenry.
So I went out on the pitch and everybody was there. Nobody had left and they were all there and they all singing and typical Irish. I couldn't believe that after a result like that, when you haven't qualified, they would still stand there and sing and
show their appreciation.
And I can still hear them. They were singing The Fields of Athenry, and he was there. And I came in afterwards, and he had been crying, and he said to me, "I don't cry very easily," he said, but they were singing The Fields of Athenry, and when he came to the verse, we had dreams and songs to sing. He said, "I felt a tear trickle down my face." And that was remarkable for the big man to say that. And it kind of highlighted, it was probably the most emotional night of all the great nights we had in the Jack Charlton era.
And I never forgot that morning after the match. He came in to me and he said, "Charlie, I might drop over before the Christmas." "I know," he said, "I won't. To tell you what I'll do, I'm going fishing in the new year. And I come back then in the new year and I'll tell them that I'm packing in. And we'll have a night out before I pack in. See?" And I said, "Okay, I hope you change your mind." See? But at that time, the feeling was that we were gone boy.
I took the job in January and I wanted to stay as manager until January so I could say I've been here for 10 years. And then I would come over and resign. And I told them that after if we qualified, I would stay with the team until after we'd played in the competition. But if we didn't qualify in that I would be leaving after the game. And they all knew this. They all knew this. And as it happened, that's exactly what happened. The crowd must have got the thing in their mind. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then I got a phone call about 3 days before Christmas asking me to come across and resign before Christmas. And I had a little bit of an argument with them. I said, "Oh, you know, I've been with you for 10 years. I want to stay on until January." And then they were saying, "Well, we've got to appoint somebody else after January." I said, "Well, what games you got on?" "There's nothing on." I said, "Can't you leave it till January?" I said, "I don't want to give the Irish people a Christmas present by coming here and resigning 3 days before Christmas." I said, "Leave it until..." But they didn't. And I came across and I wasn't in a very good mood.
Early one morning I got a call from Johnny's son. He said, "Father," he always called him Father. "Father," said, "can you meet him at the Baker Inn at 4 o'clock today?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Any reason why?" He said, "Well, I'd tell you." And then up around the 1:30 news here, and he had jacked in. Now, because the people in the FAI had called him in and practically put the gun to his head.
So we started out through Dublin, and somebody recognised me and they tooted the horn, and then before we knew what was happening, we must have had a couple of hundred cars in a line behind us, following us through Dublin.
Oh, really?
And they were all tooting the horns as we went. And it wasn't a staying thing, it was thanks. You know, it was lovely. It was really nice. I mean, very emotional going through in the car.
It's 10 years since Jack retired, more or less, and we have a bit of perspective on it. Now, what do you think his legacy is in terms of football in Ireland?
He popularised the game in this country in a big way. I think he might have antagonised a lot of football people in the way they consider the way the game should be played. But from an Irishman's point of view, there were matches on the television, whether it be Gaelic hurling matches, had to be put back or played next day. And I think that with the television and the success of the Irish team around the country,
it kind of spread out from the garrison towns,
yes,
as it were. Yeah.
Definitely. And people, young people were playing soccer. See, I'm not anti-Gaelic, anti-hurling, or anti-football or pro-football. I love to see kids playing any sport. And soccer is a great game. I played it from the time I was a kid. Got a bit of stick at school in Brunswick Street with the Christian Brothers for playing. I didn't know what they were talking about, to be quite honest. But this was a national team with the players, and Jack Charlton representing this country on an international stage. And what it did for the country, I think, was great. It gave an excuse for the supporters to go away and show what a good crowd they were.
So they became our best ambassadors.
We're the best
really.
everywhere. So that's what As in my opinion, is what the international team was all about. When I was managing the international team, that's the reason I wanted to do it. I would have loved as an Irishman to take the Irish team onto the international stage and show people that this is the country that we come from.
The story. We were playing the North of Ireland. You might recall the match was on at 1 o'clock in the day, and a traveller friend of mine was working in some little village down in around by Roscommon. And he was talking to the shopkeeper, and the old lady came in and said, "Will you hurry up, please? I want to go home and see the match."
When I was a youngster in Kerry, there was one soccer team in Kerry back in the 1950s and 60s. I think there are now about 76.
Wow.
But on the other hand, isn't it great to see guys playing? I mean,
Yes.
only 15 guys can play for the Kerry team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's great to see the youngsters out there, and it's certainly, I think that's also part of the success of the Charlton era, that soccer got a lot more coverage, got a lot more television, and a lot more youngsters have been playing it.
There are a lot of barriers in this country, as we know, towards soccer, and that's gone, and that's gone forever. I mean, people are supporting this team from all corners of the country.
Yeah, there would be,
they're going to the Broad,
tomorrow,
they're going to Broad, they support Dublin, they support Kerry, they support Cork, and that's the way it should be. And I think Jack did that. You know, Jack was the first to take us to a major championship, and it needed us to go to a major championship and get on the telly and do the things that we did, because the whole country was pulling for the team together. Yeah. Whether it be hurling supporters, rugby supporters, Gaelic supporters, there was actually a great enthusiasm for the team, and the soccer team representing the team, the country abroad. And I think that's the legacy, in my opinion, that Jack will leave this country.
Jack, you know, later on, he received his Irish citizenship and his Irish passport. Was there was obviously there was no money involved in that, no money passed hands for that one. But Jack obviously deserved it.
I certainly, when I brought it to the cabinet at the time, I certainly felt he deserved it. He had brought Irish sport onto a new stage completely, and you know, I think every Irishman living at home or abroad were proud of, and Irish women indeed were proud of what Jack Charlton achieved. I think it was a fitting honour for him. I mean, he had achieved everything that could be achieved in sport. I think financially he's pretty successful as well. So here was something that it hasn't been bestowed too often. Right. It's a very rare honour.
I think he's very proud.
And I think certainly at the time he had no hesitation, and the day he came to the Rs to get it from Mary Robinson, and then we had a function in Ivy House, he was very, very proud.
Me and him didn't see eye to eye with a lot of things, but I can't argue with what he got, what he brought to Ireland, you know, the successful level, but it had a limited time, and we found that out by '96 when we got to playing against Holland in that playoff game at Anfield. You know, that kind of, for the end, that was the end. But at the same time, you can't argue the success we got. We'd never even got near that before. So I would never ever argue with that. The method of it, well, we all have different opinions on, but can't argue with the success. You've got to say he's done fantastically well.
I think he gave us a belief in ourselves that as a football team we didn't have, you know, which we now take for granted. I think he also gave us ordinariness, because he was an ordinary man, too ordinary at times. It certainly showed to me, you know, that you didn't have to be a complete bully, in love with yourself, look down on everybody else. You didn't have to be all them to be a star in the football world, and I think his dignity throughout all that. I mean, he'd lose the rag with you and he'd make a show of you, but it was over and done with at that time. And a very charming man who I would like to think is a friend. There's not many managers I can say that about.
Jack Charlton, I think, has left behind a great degree of honesty. He got honesty out of his players. He gave to the honesty to the fans, and they reciprocated. I think that is what stands out for me. And the fact that today, did he do right, did he do wrong? Well, that balance book, that great ledger, is there for everyone to see. He can walk down any village, any town, any city in this land and be recognised and welcomed. I'm not so sure he could do the same in every village in England.
Came to Sunderland to see me play near the end of my career, and of course I've been telling the lads all the Irish stories, and it was Jack this, Jack that. They used to get on to me all the time. But he actually came to one of the games, so I got him players' lounge tickets, so in front of all my teammates, you know, I was there with my hero sort of Jack thing, you know, and I had a big smile on my face. Jack came over and he went, you know, you were fucking hopeless today, you know.
Nobody does it better than the Irish. Nobody.
That's just because you're talking to me, John. Jack Charlton's Irish managerial career speaks for itself. In a tenure that spanned 94 games, won 47, drew 30 and lost 17. 128 goals for, 63 against. Now, before he took over, we'd never qualified for a major tournament. Jack Charlton gave us 3 glorious summers in 88, 90 and 94. He became our favourite adopted son. Some would argue that managing the Irish team was the best thing that ever happened to him. But the truth of the matter is that his management of the Irish soccer team was the best thing that ever happened to us.